Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us in this latest installment of our five-part series titled Diving into the Cloud. Today's material will deal with the as-a-service trend. So we're going to look to, as stated here, explain and compare three different models within the as-a-service realm, those being infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So with that being said, again, my thanks for everyone returning. And I look forward to today's session as well as the next two that we have hereafter to bring this whole series to a conclusion. So with that being said, myself, Warren Rayburn, I'm the Executive Vice President at Line Systems. In this capacity, I oversee the operations, sales, and engineering functions of the organization. I've been with the company for 13 years now. And it's a very exciting time for us because as we've grown as an organization, retiring our former wholesale identified piece in the marketplace, we've evolved into, within the last 6 years, a soft switch services provider. So much of what we're doing now has led to the evolution and adoption of such cloud-based services, whereby we're working with customers to facilitate connectivity in those cases, which we'll get into here shortly, as well as offering some of those services as well. But today's installment of the series, and the series in general, is meant to be an objective, educational look to all things to consider when getting into this space and the due diligence items we feel are important to cover when investigating these opportunities. So the definition of infrastructure as a service, very quickly. So it's the provision model in which an organization outsources the equipment used to support operations, including storage area networks, hardware-related considerations, servers for web, email, and other such applications, development, and networking components. The service provider owns the equipment, or you yourself may look to a CapEx model to purchase accordingly, and there's the responsibility therein for housing, running, and maintaining it in the event that you do partner with a data services provider to address such needs. So with that said, we wanted to discuss in each one of these cases features and benefits of every environment in play. So on the infrastructure as a service side, which coincidentally, there was a Gartner study that basically infrastructure as a service, which includes, as we mentioned, storage, area networks, print services, cloud computing, etc., and the support therein, underlying support on the hardware side, continued as the fastest growing segment of the market, growing to 42.4% between 2012 and 13, to a $6.1 billion industry, and expected to grow by another 47.3% by the end of 13 into 14 to possibly $9 billion being spent on infrastructure as a service globally. So again, something that has come up again and again in conversation, and it speaks to that first point, which is scalability. So the resources there are available as needed when the client requires it, be it due to a situation where there's an acquisition, natural disaster, or otherwise. And it also facilitates the elimination of delays in the expansion of capacity or the wasting of unused capacity, for that matter, in an oversubscription scenario. Little to point two here. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss was hardware costs, right? So it's not that necessarily the OpEx cost model is the only option here. There are certainly CapEx expenditures that are going to take place from an installation perspective. There's also obviously the ability within a private cloud environment to purchase your own hardware and resources and avoid the sharing concept of a public cloud. But the OpEx model is an interesting piece in the IaaS space. So the underlying provider, the underlying physical hardware that supports an IaaS service is set up and maintained by the cloud provider, saving the time and cost of doing so on your side as the client. So again, it's a situation whereby you have the existing expertise, the existing hardware, the existing facilities, and security to really make this this leap into the cloud not as intimidating and much more affordable than otherwise you may perceive based on your former experiences with the hardware environments of private environments, be it a hub that you have on a local area network or something you're working through on a private cloud space. Pay-as-you-go service model. So as we talked about the scalability angle, this complements that. So the service can be accessed on demand, and the client only pays for the resources they actually use. So again, that OpEx being consideration, it's a scenario where it's subscription-based, and you can make those changes based on the needs of your environment, the needs of your business, the needs of your management, and then the respective tools that you're looking to utilize as well. Flexibility, the service can usually be accessed from any location as long as there's an internet connection and the security protocol of the cloud allows for it. So the flexibility piece, that's going to be a situation whereby you absolutely want to make sure, again, from a disaster prevention standpoint, you can eliminate sensitivity to physical plant. So if you have a car accident in front of your place of business and all of a sudden you lose access, from an internet perspective, you can access those same applications and storage area network environments to your data at the end of the day by just simply bring your own device scenario. Physical security, services available through a public or private cloud, which are hosted externally there being the key, with the cloud provider, benefit from the physical security afforded to the servers, which are hosted within a data center environment. So you're talking about retinal scanners, you're talking about fingerprint scanners, you're talking about ID badges, 24/7 armed security, physical elements therein, from a fencing and accessibility perspective. So think about it globally. You have a situation where you have hospital care providers, you have government service providers, a number of highly sensitive environments, and those things are going to play out and demand the security from a regulatory and compliance perspective that we all need, but also lend that to you as well as a participating partner with that data center provider. No single point of failure or mitigating those single points of failure. So basically what we're looking at here is the ability, taking advantage of a hardware farm or environment to readily turn up or spin up resources in the event of a disaster. You have a failure. Now you're not waiting on a physical server to come in to your place of business and then the associated installation. You're just making a phone call to your data services partner, a data center partner, and making sure that you have the availability that you've contracted for to enact those disaster recovery policies. But also just from a plant standpoint, I mentioned, the physical infrastructure and maybe a T1 service or an Ethernet service. Look into options to bring diverse routes to your building. So much of what the cable providers are bringing to the table now with Ethernet services. You have Cablevision and LightPath in the Northeast. You have Time Warner Cable. You have Comcast. You have Cox. You have any number of varieties that at the end of the day aren't tied to the local exchange carrier network any longer. And then with various partnerships like, for example, with LSI, you can take those disparate network connections and bring them back to a central internet services provider who can then, facilitate those connectivity means, but then also make sure that you have diverse routes on the back end as well. So next, we're going to make our way into platform as a service. Now, platform as a service, I'm going to use Line Systems as an example here momentarily, but that's a category of cloud computing that enables subscribers to build applications and services or software components over the internet while running the hardware, operating system, storage, and network capacity to run those apps from the platform as a service provider. So at its core, according to Salesforce.com, which is a global CRM engine which we use here at Line Systems, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with, PaaS eliminates the expense and complexity of evaluating, buying, configuring, and managing all the hardware and software needed for custom-built applications. So we use Line Systems as an example. So for the first 8 years of our existence, we were a Verizon wholesale partner, but then we migrated into, as I mentioned, the IP soft switch environment, offering our own voice, data, and internet capabilities. So in order to do so, you obviously have to find a switching partner and platform provider, which is exactly what we did with the folks at Metaswitch. So again, we leased hardware initially. We ended up now moving to a fully owned and managed hardware environment, but then the software licensing and overlays, the feature server functionality is then put into that environment by the platform provider. And all of that information, the hardware and otherwise, is stored at a secure data center that we have in Philadelphia with a secondary data center as well. And in fact, we're looking at a third data center right now out in Chicago to increase our geographic diversity. So there's quite a bit out there at the end of the day that you're going to want to take into consideration when looking at something of that, when you're looking at a platform as a service model. But ultimately, accessibility, security, those are all going to be very, very key considerations here, as well as cost. So with that being said, let's get into the benefits. So the control within a platform as a service environment. So you're buying that engine, but then you're responsible for outfitting it thereafter, making any necessary adjustments, but working with the manufacturer at the end of the day to make sure you are operating optimally and to your satisfaction. So ultimately, you're the one that maintains control over the deployed applications, configuration settings, and anything else as it pertains to the application hosting environment. No physical infrastructure. You don't need to necessarily purchase the hardware yourself or employ the expertise to manage it. PaaS allows you to scale your business needs quickly, efficiently, and rely on partnerships with subject matter experts at the end of the day to administer those environments, and then maybe complement in-house IT staff that you have, that those gentlemen or those members of staff that would be responsible for potentially procuring the hardware or then managing those environments and access controls and other such considerations. Flexibility. You guys are going to hear that over and over again here today when we talk about these as-a-service models. But the flexibility is a situation where you maintain control of the tools that are installed within the platform. You opt in or opt out of other, any respective option at the end of the day. You're outfitting this exactly to your needs. And you can create a platform that suits your specific requirements, as I mentioned, by maybe, cherry picking the things that you want to make available to your usership or your customers, while not necessarily engaging on other fronts that you don't feel are adequate or superfluous to your needs. Adaptability. Features can be changed on an as-needed basis. So as I mentioned, you can participate, as we do on the dial tone side here with Metaswitch, as well as the data and the internet piece. But on the dial tone side, there are certain pieces of the service model that we have available to us within the meta infrastructure that we don't participate in, and it doesn't cost us a dime in either direction. Or we can opt in later down the line when we find the market case to support the expansion of our respective technology. Then we're going to take that on. Collaboration with internet connections. Your developers spread across several locations to work together on the same application build. The platform as a service allows them to do that. That's the universal aspect of this. The software as a service model, which we're going to get into next, certainly complements that on a larger scale. And allowing universal accessibility, the flexibility, and the adaptability that ultimately you're looking for to encourage creativity and enforce accountability as well. And lastly, building security. Again, a recurring theme in all three of these as-a-service considerations. But the security is provided, including data security, backup, and recovery, more often than not with the provider on the data center side, or the service provider itself on the platform. And then more often, then as is often the case as well, you yourself may take additional steps to provide further security measures for your service environment. So lastly, we're going to get into software as a service. So software as a service is the most popular of the three primary cloud computing models, though as we indicated earlier, IaaS has seen the most significant growth according to Gartner. SaaS delivers applications over the internet as a service rather than requiring installation and management of physical software, addressing perhaps license upgrades and or needs, and also by parlaying this into a platform and an infrastructure as a service environment, addressing the hardware-related considerations as well. So features and benefits, that's what we're going to jump into here next. Ease of use. SaaS applications are available from any computer device. Again, BYOD being such a prevalent conversation piece in the marketplace these days. Anywhere, anytime, and any device for that matter, as long as there's that internet connection available to them and they have the proper credentials. Because most people are familiar with using the internet to find out what they need, SaaS apps tend to have high adoption rates with a lower learning curve. Next, we're going to talk about the fact that the hardware and software requirements are oftentimes mitigated, reduced, or eliminated altogether. So SaaS customers have no hardware or software to buy, install, maintain, or update in many cases because they're parlaying that into a platform as a service or an infrastructure as a service environment. The SaaS ultimately allows customers greater flexibility, collaboration, and creativity by creating a more user-integrated environment and also encouraging participation based on the updates that are then automatically rendered from the service provider as opposed to those software installs and updates that we're also enamored with that come across by way of our IT groups. Painless upgrades. Because the SaaS provider manages all updates and upgrades, as I just indicated, there are no patches for the customer to download or install. The SaaS provider manages availability or in conjunction with your local IT staff, which has rendered the tools to do so as well. So there's no need for customers to add hardware, software, bandwidth as their user base grows or else as otherwise directed. So it's a much more collaborative environment with the provider at the end of the day, and also one that whereby your tools available for remote access and monitoring give your IT staff greater penetration and visibility. Seamless integrations, SaaS vendors with true multi-tenant architectures can scale indefinitely to meet customer demand. Many SaaS providers also offer customization capabilities to meet specific needs. So again, it's that collaborative element of this, whereby everything's housed in a universal environment that allow people to come and go and address development considerations and collaboration. Plus, many provided APIs allow you to integrate with existing business production systems, i.e. perhaps organic systems that you have in place, or between known entities. There's anytime you get into a software as a service environment, you certainly want to ask what API functionality is there based on what you may have for your CRM engine or customer relationship management tools, things of that nature. So you're going to certainly want to ask those related questions and make sure that there's complementary efficiencies that you may not necessarily account for on the front end. So with that said, lastly, in the software as a service environment, we had an example here in the latest edition of the magazine CIO. There was a case study about French cosmetics company Clarins International. They lost an e-commerce site in China, aiming to grow their global revenue in an expanding Chinese consumer market, which obviously is self-evident. Before, the company sold its lotions and potions in China through other outlets. Now the trick was to stay true to their global brand identity while creating a website tailored for Chinese customers. So what they ended up doing there was taking on a cloud-based e-commerce platform to help meet this goal and complement that with a run on a e-commerce platform with a software as a service solution delivered by Demandware. So what they've been able to do is roll out that Chinese market. They've been able to address the cultural differences and the demographics involved to the extent of seeing double-digit sales growth in the first 6 months after launch. So one of the key factors they mentioned was it allowed their e-commerce group time to focus on the features that are key to the marketing campaigns, the key to the logistical elements of things and production considerations that ultimately, again, allowed their subject matter experts to focus on what they had in front of them and hand the keys to the software as a service and the platform as a service provider to help them grow their business. So with that said, the comparisons, we just wanted to talk quickly here too, and I think I've even alluded to it here, the complementary nature of these services. So the infrastructure as a service, just being, as we said, the physical elements of it, servers, storage area networks, networking environments, routers, switches, hypothetically, all of those, the various components to ultimately get you into whatever respective environment that it is you hope to replicate or establish, for that matter, as well physically. Platform as a service, they'll build it. So overlaying the infrastructure, and then you're talking about the platform, like we talked about our IP soft switch. But this can get back to operating systems, application stacks, etc., which lead into the third part, which that is the software as a service, or the buy it phase. So that's going to be the applications, the packaged software, that then complement the platform as a service models you've deployed, or as well as hypothetically have it hosted in an infrastructure environment as a service. Have that information from your software environment stored in your IaaS environment. Have the application for your software side be personally developed and customized to meet some of your platform demands and or needs. So then we've got 3 questions to ask on security. Then we're going to have a second piece of this on availability, and then last on control. Security, is your production environment hosted in a state-of-the-art facility? So again, very key to get a very detailed orientation as to the partnership that you're going to facilitate with the data center provider. Ultimately, you want to get several tours in. You want to have your questions answered about a variety of different means to succeed, which again we'll get into here shortly with the on control questions. But next, what level of security and care is built in and provided? So, we talked about the physical elements of that, but also, the redundancy within the Internet Services Platform, the ability to house your workforce if absolutely need be. Third, how often will my data be backed up? And again, that's something you can negotiate. That's something you certainly want to have that discussion about. Time your updates. Make sure that there's diversity to your the security platform as well. So in other words, you may take one physical, virtual environment, I should say, at the primary data center and then push that update once completed over to a second completely geographically diverse data center. And that way you're backed up at Site A and Site B, so in the event you lose connectivity or access to Site A, you've got all of that information available for your BYOD users to then get access to that material. So on availability, do you have hardware redundancy in place to avoid consequences due to equipment failure? So again, a major consideration when graduating from the local data center environment to an infrastructure as a service environment. And more often than not, we find our customers are taking that first leap, that they're retiring web servers or email servers and going to the cloud with those needs. Again, the fear being failure or access, and that's certainly something that's warranted. Does your outsourced data center have redundancy power supplies, such as battery and diesel generators? So take that a step further, because that's going to be all part of the dog and pony show when you go to the data center provider. But you're going to want to ask about capacity as it pertains to usership and subscribers, capacity as it pertains to diverse routes for power coming into the location, and as far as availability, if that location is rendered inoperable, what are steps 2 and 3 to make sure that your business continues to run? Lastly, does your staff include a highly qualified team that will monitor 24/7, 365? So does this the data center service provider that you're going to partner with, do they have complementary resources to offset some of the demand on your IT team, and do they actually lend themselves to being of a more proliferating nature, allowing you to then in turn take on greater responsibility and growth, and leave the IT staff in place and allow those numbers to remain dormant? Or does it, allow for greater functionality on the management side? There's so many considerations there, but ultimately you're looking for a complementary group of professionals that understand the sensitivity and needs of your environment. Next, we're going to go to controls. So do you have a detailed backup plan in place? We talked about primary and secondary data centers today. We talked about plant materials. So how does your DS1 level network get backed up by perhaps a secondary internet connection at your location? All of those things are very key components, of this process. Where and how do you store the backups? So we talked about data centers. Do you also perhaps contract with a storage company that comes and physically gets the material? Something a lot of folks are getting away from, because then it talks about availability and somebody having to physically get to those tapes and access that information. So again, the scheduling of those jobs and the accessibility of that material in the event of a disaster. Is my data fully exportable in a format that I can easily reuse? Very simple question, but a very applicable consideration. Ultimately, we talked about the storage, and are you working with a data center provider that, again, dispatches and has somebody come grab tapes, and ultimately there's a retrieval process and the shipping process. But if you do have remote access to your data, again, how are you going to be able to extract that? How readily can you extract that? Any formatting considerations, any integration considerations with other new SaaS options that you may have, or organically developed systems, etc. So ultimately, that leads us into the last portion here concerning questions. First, I want to thank everybody for their attendance today. I'd also like to thank you for your participation previously, and hope to see you during the course of the next 2 conversations we're having in wrapping up the series. And the next part of that installment, the 4th one, being 5 tips to keep your data secure on the cloud. And interestingly enough, one of the questions that came through during the course of the presentation dealt with security. So I want to encourage you to come to that next portion of the series. But importantly, it's one of those scenarios whereby when discussing security, it's a scenario whereby it's multi-tiered. So you have the physical access to the site, you have the consideration as it pertains to the security and sanctity of your environment and the maintenance of that environment. You have the security of the data and the encryption that comes with it. Will your network services provider and access provider on the internet pass through your encryption requirements? Do the security elements of the data center provider, as well as your network service provider, do they meet what you're required to address from a regulatory perspective? PCA compliance, HIPAA compliance. PCA is huge in any transactional environment. PCI compliance, as it pertains to transactional information, that's the Visa certification process for credit card transactions, the auditing piece that comes with that. So do you have the tools and expertise in place within your organization as well as your partner provider to address those needs on a security basis? Do you have any risks potentially for your business from an operational perspective? In the event that there's a scan done and your PCI in your environment and you're not compliant, well, you can't process credit cards for a period of time until you do. So those are all very serious considerations as it pertains to security. And again, something that we'll delve a great deal more into on April the 24th at 1 o'clock. The last part of the series will be in May, and that's going to deal with the cost of these environments. And is it cost efficiencies that you're looking for? Is it work-related efficiencies that you're looking for? All of those related considerations will be covered in that last part. So we want to thank you all again for attending the previous 3 installments. I want to thank you for your participation today. And the question that came through on the security side, again, feel free to reach out to me directly with any questions. You can reach me at warren@linesystems.com or info@linesystems.com as well. So again, thank you all so much, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.